Okay, so I want to talk about how English is a nonsensical language. Okay, English is a fairly nonsensical language. This language has like 10,000 rules, and 75% of them contradict each other. Okay, I'm really tired of almost this use of English being used as a gauge of intelligence when sometimes when you are more likely to you're more likely to make mistakes using English if you are expressing intelligence. You're more likely to make a mistake if you're being intelligent when using English. What do I mean? Like for example, I um I was making a video talking about a potential pi variant, but I was calling it a p variant. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, the p variant, and someone corrected me in the comment section like, uh, do you mean it's not pronounced P, it's pie? You're saying urine. And I'm like, oh, I just responded like something like the English language or whatever. But the reason why I was pronouncing it P is because there's people from like a lot of people from China, they come here and their name is spelled P-I and you pronounce it P. So that was actually intelligent of me. That's typically how you would learn a language in the first place. you see a word, you see a word, you hear how it's pronounced, and then that's how you assume that's how it's pronounced. It's being intelligent. Um, but my expression of intelligence created this sort of mistake in English because the language is so nonsensical. It's so inconsistent. There's like 10,000 rules. That might be a slight exaggeration, but there's like 10,000 rules, but 75% of the rules contradict each other. It makes no sense. And that's a common thing. Why can't it just be why can there be something spelled P-E-E and P-I? I mean the same thing. Like there's way too many homonyms in English. Like the there thing. That's intelligent. That's like you would assume that shouldn't be a thing. But you would assume that something's spelled a certain way because it's pronounced the same way. But then there's three different ways to spell there. Why? Why are there so many silent letters? What's the purpose? What's the point? You have to basically be, it's not, here's the thing English is a very logical language, okay? And people with higher logic have an easier time with it. Of course you do. You have a higher logical intelligence, but logical intelligence is just one type of intelligence. There's actually multiple types of intelligence: logical, intuitive, practical, creative, and social. Okay? But the thing with these people with a higher logical intelligence, they just memorize the nonsense. They memorize the inconsistencies because there's just some things in the English language you just have to have been exposed to it. You can be a very intelligent person, but if you just weren't exposed to it to learn like logical types people just learn the nonsense because you have that ability to. My logical intelligence is not that high where I'm able to keep track of the inconsistent rules and the nonsense. Yes, I will misspell there because it's just intelligence to spell a word consistently, right? Like if say like a hyper intelligence ET came to Earth, and they're like, I would like to learn your language. Um, I looked through your database and I learned all the, you know, how to pronounce the words and stuff, and like I learned all the basic rules. Um, I would like to test my grasp of the language, right? And they're like, um, I don't know, you're asking them to spell something, and you're getting a few things right, but then you're like what's some inconsistent thing in English? Like fork. Can you spell fork? Fork. Yeah, that's right. Good. I assumed as much. Okay, can you spell phone? Of course. Phone. No, it's spelled Phone. That hyper intelligent ET would be like, what was that? Like, that's what it would be like because it's like, why? Why? So there's the rule. Here's a function. This is how this letter functions. These are the rules of these languages. This is how you pronounce this, blah, blah, blah. And then there, you have something like phone. It's spelled Phone. It's like, what? Why? And there's like all those little just inconsistent things. Why isn't egg spelled EG? Why is it spelled EGG? These silent letters. You just hear about these immigrants and these people who can be intelligent just having issues of English because it's just so inconsistent. These people with higher logical intelligence just memorize it. So I don't see how you're using it as a gauge of not just intelligence but like value, right? There's a strong correlation with these like English snobs and just this casteist behavior. Like they're not just ranking your intelligence, they're ranking your value as and worth as a human being, as a Gaian. They're just like, oh, like sometimes they're like wait for you to make a mistake. Like, yeah, confirmed. Dumb troll. It's like, no, English is just a hot mess, to be honest. Like, it just makes no sense. And then it's like these different things, like people with, first of all, like, it's just so funny that these people express, use it, it's always gravitating around intelligence, engaging it, and ranking you when there's so much unintelligent expression around it. What I mean is like people will like it was very unintelligent to make non to make ill people with lower logical intelligence learn a very logical language. People with lower logical intelligence do have an issue, like more practical types, creative types. They do have an issue with it. Then why did you make non-logical people learn? It's like that thing where people like are in school, like we don't want to learn this certain school subject, and they're like anti-intellectual. But then when you do that subject and you're bad at it, they're like you're an idiot. No, it was intelligent to recognize that you wouldn't be good at something like calculus. I can't. I wouldn't be good at calculus. I don't want. Let's not make it mandatory to learn calculus. Anti-intellectual tries calculus, bad at it. Oh, he's an idiot. No, it was intelligent for me to recognize that I wouldn't be able to do that well, actually. And it's the same thing with English language. It's like, no, people with, it's kind of like, um, I know, Elvins, like, you're forcing everyone to learn the Elven language, and non elves aren't learning it, and the elves are like, fools, idiots. They don't speak Elven very well. Like, you can't use yourself as your own standard. More so, like, they're not Elven. Yes, non Elvens don't speak Elven well. You're an elf. And it's the same thing. Like, it's like English is like the language of the logical types, right? But we're not all logical types. Just because we don't speak it well doesn't mean we're dumb. It just means we're not logical types. And then you also see this lack of intelligence, like, you know, non people with practical intelligence will speak English out of order and more slowly, and they call it dumb, even though linguists have found that that's there. These are these sort of creoles and hood accents and whatever consistently are consistent as languages. But right, it's seemingly out of order. Words are dropped, this, that, and the fourth, slower. but they haven't put these pieces together that these people's remote relatives, cousins, like say in like Africa or something, they speak their language. It can be spoken fast. It's consistent. It's in order. It's probably they're probably speaking a more practical language, a more creative language, more abstract. While English is a very rational language, it's more logical. Like you see how they like say like they use it as a gauge of intelligence, but they don't. A lot of you people don't express other forms of intelligence or just intelligence at all because you don't connect the dots or make these insightful observations and realizations and that type of thing. They speak very quickly, fast, in order. Da, 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 da. It's probably a practical language. It's probably a creative language. And if you have a high practical intelligence, a high creative intelligence, you could probably speak it well, pick it up easier, etc. Okay, it's just English is a mess, and there's always this sort of casteist vibe to it because these same English snobs will are so proud that English is one of the most spoken languages in the world and so widespread. And it's like, how did that happen? Like, it's like what's not being said by these people is always so the loudest thing. It's so glaring. So you're proud about the widespread use of English, and you just omit how that happened. Very telling, very casteist energy. It was shoved down people's throats. It was at the barrel of a gun. It was forced on people. Like, hello. Um, it's not like English was this great language, clearly. Though I will admit there is a lot of I like the language. I can't, even though I just tore it apart. I like it. There's a lot of cool aspects to it. Sometimes like you can just sit around and say phrases and sayings and this type of stuff. But I mean, I feel like it's more of an observational language, and there's not anything left really to observe. Like it's a very outside looking in language. You know what I'm saying? And it's fun to make observations. You know, like my whole Elven thing, that was kind of fun. And it's English lets you do that. Like, you're like an elven looking down at non elvens. You see how English has this sort of like, it's like a ninja language. It's just like, but it has a lot of good aspects to it. But it is not some like super great pure. It's not this pure chosen language, you know that, and that's why it's so widespread because it's a mess of a language. I think it's a decent cosmopolitan language. Like I don't think, and that's how it should be treated. It's like a almost either like a business cool business language, or at least there is a cosmopolitan language, right? And I do feel like it's civilized. It's a more civilized language. I'm not afraid of saying that because it's just because it's so logical and so technical, it's almost a ethnic. Is that a word? It's just non ethnic. And because it's not ethnic, not it's just a non tribal language. Um, where it's almost such a cold, sterile language. There's some good aspect to it, right? It's like a moon language. It's just so, but that makes it more inclusive. That makes it better as a universal language. Where, I mean, I can go up to someone who's complete has completely different origins from me and appearance than me, and we're talking. To me, that's more civilized because then you have tribal languages. It's like two tribal languages, and it's like friction and xenophobia, and it's like, you know what I'm saying? But overall, it's just a trash language. Not a trash language, but it's a flawed, poor language. And then there's some aspects of it. It's like that possessiveness where it's um, like you remember when that person was like on fleek. So is that an English word? because technically it's just a sound. But because they are primarily English speaker, if someone says like on fleek, they just make up a new word on the spot. Is that word an English language? An English word? But you see how it like kind of absorbs everything, and then people get to take credit for everything because it's actually always has been a cosmopolitan language. It has so many. It's already was a like the English people try to take credit for it. No, it was already a conglomerate. English identified people. It was already a conglomerate language, a mixed language. There's so many root words and like loan words and that type of thing. But these cat it's a white coded language, so all these white coast people who take pride about it, you're taking pride for other people's work and other and different origins and that type of thing. Or they disregard it so widespread as well because of like music and entertainment. But a lot of this music and entertainment originated from other populations. Like one reason English is so popular is because of rap and hip hop and pop, which originates from like Creoles and black identified people and that type of thing. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. I believe we should, start. We should increase the use of sign language. That would be the best universal language. Um, but there's a lot of casteism around this sort of pro English um, sort of approach, and I'm very fed up about this sort of value intelligence gauging based on it. I'm always going to make grammar mistakes, vocabulary mistakes, mistakes speaking and spelling English, but primarily because I'm not a hyperlogical type and because it's a highly um, messy, nonsensical language.